Hello everybody. I would like to talk to Dr. Rainera Zitelmanna today. Hello Rainer.
Hi.
So let me introduce you to our audience. You are a man of many interests and many successes. First, you was academic, then you had a PhD in history and sociology, then you worked in journalism as a head of department in a big German newspaper, Die Welt. Is it true? It's a huge, it seems, Die Welt. So then you became an entrepreneur and started your own company dealing with public relations and consulting. Then you grew this company for 16 years and then sold it, when it was the leading player for public relations for real estate companies in Germany. You are also a long-term real estate investor, mainly in Berlin. In brief, you are extremely rich person, and also you are like Schwarzenegger because you are a bodybuilder. And finally, you are a strong advocate of free market capitalism, and about this we will be talking about in our conversation now. So today we will talk about this new book just published in Poland, The Race of the White Eagle, Poland from Socialism to Prosperity. This is a rather tiny book and it was translated and published into how many languages, Rainer?
Now in 5, but it will be much more.
Much more. Okay, so we will talk about this a little bit later. How did you become interested in Polish economy?
So there were several reasons. The first reason is that when I had my public relation company in Germany, we had the task in the beginning of the 2000s to make public relations for a German real estate investor who built shopping centers in Poland. And at this time, most of the people didn't know much about Poland, what changed there. You know, it takes time if something changed in a country from the old image to the what happens right now. This was the first time I was involved with this topic in the beginning of the 2000s. And then the longest relation that I had in my life was with my girlfriend. Her parents came from Poland, so I have also a personal relationship to Poland. And then the last reason was there's an index, I will mention it later in detail. It's the index of economic freedom. This is the ranking, how economically free are all countries in the world. At the top are countries like Switzerland or Singapore, and at the bottom, North Korea or Venezuela and Cuba. And for me, it's not so interesting the rank compared with other countries, but the improvement over a period of time. And when I analyzed this index, I saw that there are 2 countries, Vietnam and Poland, that gained so many scores as no other country of comparable size. There are some very small countries who gained maybe more scores, but I speak now about countries with a higher population as Poland and Vietnam. And these were both outstanding countries where economic freedom improved much more than in all other countries. And so I was curious to find out more about these countries, Poland and Vietnam, that, by the way, have a lot together.
When you started this relation with Poland, what specifically did you find interesting in Poland?
The most interesting thing was, and I think this is underestimated by a lot of people, how the attitude and the mindset changed of the people. Because economists, they tend to analyze data, and of course we have a lot of amazing data, how the GDP per capita grew or the income. But I think this is only possible when people start to think in a different way. It is as it is in your own life. If you want to change something in your life, first you have to change your mindset. And maybe, I think later we will talk more about it in detail, but I think this is very often underestimated, how people think. Every country is in the way as people think.
So the Polish edition of this book, I will show it again to our viewers, starts with a preface written by Professor Leszek Balcerowicz. What is your opinion on Professor Balcerowicz?
I think he was so very important for this, what happened in Poland. I know that there are people who admire him. I know that there are also people in Poland who don't like him. But I think if you analyze what happened in Poland in the 90s, these reforms, they wouldn't have been possible without him. And I think because he has a strong belief system, he believes in the teachings of Ludwig von Mises and Hayek, and he showed that they work. And maybe this is also something we can talk later more in detail. He believes in similar things as Javier Milei today in Argentina. They have a different personality, but for me, a lot of people in the world, they have never heard the name of Balcerowicz. They know Maggie Thatcher, they know Ronald Reagan, they know Deng Xiaoping. And if I talk with people and they never heard about him, I tell them, this is the Maggie Thatcher of Poland. And his name is Balcerowicz, to make it short.
Yeah. So you described in this book the life in Poland under socialism. You wrote about the poverty, the shortages of food and goods, long lines in front of the shops and the empty shops, as a matter of fact. How strange was it for you, a citizen of rich Germany, to hear about this?
Yes, of course. We were a divided country, and also in East Germany, something were similar to the Polish situation. But I think in Poland, it was even worse than it was in East Germany. And what is impressive for me, if we have the stories about people standing in long queues or with empty shelves, these are not stories from the 50s after the war, but these are also things that happened even in the 80s. And when I think, I'm now 67 years old, what was my life in the 80s? This was when I studied, when I wrote my first doctoral dissertation, and the standard of life that we had here in West Germany, and that this was the time when people had to stand in long queues. This is, of course, very impressive that this changed in only a few decades, that Poland is now Europe's growth champion. It's amazing.
So in the next part of the book, you wrote and you described the transformation process which occurred in Poland. In what sense it was different from other countries in Eastern Europe, and what Poland did right and what Poland did wrong?
I think what Poland did right, it's this what people called the shock therapy. I know Balcerowicz does not like this word too much, but in a way, I think this is necessary, this shock therapy. You have to do things very fast. And I think a huge difference is always if you have privatizations, something does not work as it should be. There's always something like corruption, or the old elites from the Communist Party who take over some property. Of course, this happened also in Poland, but I think not so much as, for example, if you pair it with Russia. In Russia, privatization was only another word for that people from the old elites, and they stole the property and made it to their own property. And the result was not a free market economy. The result in Russia was something as it is today, like a kleptocracy, where the leading politicians, where they steal the things from the people. And I think this is what was, I think the only, there are some other countries where they had comparable good reforms. For example, in the Czech Republic, it was also good, or in Baltic countries. But I want to mention one difference to Vietnam, because this is what I compared in my study, Vietnam and Poland. In Vietnam, it was a process that took much longer. They didn't have this kind of shock therapy. But the difference is, in Vietnam, they have still a one-party system with a leading party that called himself communist. I don't think that it's a communist party, but these are the ruling party. There's no freedom of press, no freedom of speech in Vietnam. And so in a way, it was easier for them to make it more gradual for a longer period. The problem, and I think this was a real mastership, what Balcerowicz did, from the first day on, he had to struggle with all the other parties. Everyone told, because when you start with reforms, of course, not all things become better from one day to the next. Some things even will become worse. And of course, before the reforms, in the newspapers, in the press, you could every day read how great everything is. But then there was freedom of press, and you could read every day how terrible things are. And the other parties, they told everyone, you see what it does, things become worse. We have to go back to more government, more state. And this is very complicated. And I think this was so the great thing that Balcerowicz did it. And this was the reason why you had to did it very fast to get fast results.
It seems that you like very much Mr. Balcerowicz, because there are some interesting insights in your book that Professor Balcerowicz was not only great economist, but also had good political intuitions. He knew his only chance is to act quickly and decisively. What do you mean by this? Can you explain this?
Yes, I think as a politician, you have to understand public opinion. You have to understand how media work, how ordinary people think. And this is not self-evident for every economist. Economists usually, they deal with data, they analyze things, but this is not all what was needed. You had to be a communicator. You had to deal with this political process, and especially you had to understand public opinion. And he understood that there should be some, even if it were little things, some fast success. For example, what he told me in the interview, there was one day a headline in the newspaper that eggs became cheaper. And this was a good news for people, because some things turned to become worse. They had a recession for 2 years. They had a decline of the GDP and, of course, higher prices. But then he stopped or reduced the inflation. But on the other hand, a hidden unemployment became open unemployment. So he understood that for the communication, he had to show people some successes.
You cite a lot of data that clearly shows that Polish economic transformation was a great success. After the initial shock therapy, it quickly started grown again. Inflation down, wages up, continuous growth for more than 2 decades, stopped only by temporarily by recent pandemic. Why is it that the world talks about the rise of Asian tigers and nobody talks about the rise of Polish eagle?
I don't understand it. And this is the reason why I'm writing my books, my articles. You know, this book will be published in a lot of languages. For example, in August, I go to Argentina, because I think it's very important now for people in Argentina to learn from what happened there in Poland, to give them hope, but also to teach them patience. And I don't know why, but I think it has to be changed, because Poland, it's a great success story, and everyone who knows Poland, everyone who was there 20 or 30 years ago, and everyone who can compare it, he understands the story. I think Polish people should talk more about it. There should be more books. There should be more films, more videos. It's not only important to be successful. You have to sell it. This is, you mentioned my role model, Arnold Schwarzenegger. With my biceps, yes. And what Arnold Schwarzenegger told, it's not enough. Whatever you do, he said, whether it's in bodybuilding, whether it is in the movies, whether in the politics, you have to be able to sell it. And I think Poland was good in having success, but now there should be people who sell it. And I want to be something like a salesman who tells people all over the world, here, look at Poland, and you can learn so much from them. Especially what is the most important thing for me to tell people, two messages. First, free market reforms work. They will improve your life. But next thing, they don't work from one day to the next. What was messed up over decades can't be changed in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months. You have to be patient, and please be prepared that some things will become worse before it becomes better. This is the most important lesson from Poland. And this is the lesson, I wrote now the preface for the Argentinian version of my book. And I wrote in the preface, please learn from Poland. Two things. First, it works, but next, you have to be patient. If you're not patient and you go back to the old system, you will also go back to poverty, or you can't escape poverty. This is so important.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Rainer, because you publish a lot about Poland. You publish also, you give Poland as an example mainly for that the free economy works. More, we in Puffer channel, if someone is interested, quite every 10 days we publish articles of Rainer, both as on a website or as a podcast. So you are invited to visit Puffer YouTube channel and also listen what Rainer tells about different things all over the world. And I would like also recall the words of Arnold Schwarzenegger you mentioned. The sale is a part of life. So I completely agree with you that the Poland is not making, it's not advertising our success enough. And thank you, Rainer, that you are doing this for the Poles.
Yes, and another reason is I will add it, because I love Polish people. Even some people ask me sometimes, where would you move if you wouldn't live in Germany? And I think Warsaw would be a good idea, and I can compare it, because in the last 20 months I've been in 30 countries all over the world to promote these ideas. But I love Poland, and even a few weeks ago I met another a girl from Poland, and I think you have much more beautiful women there in Poland, and there's a lot of good things that you have there in Poland. So it's not only because of the economy, but I like Polish people. This is another reason.
Okay, thank you very much. So it is clear that Polish economic transformation was unique success. But were there any downsides, like, for example, rise of unemployment?
Yes, of course. And this is what I mentioned before. This is very important to understand. In socialism, the economic data, they were all fake. There was no unemployment, because the statistics were failed, and some people worked anything or seemed to work, but it was not real work. And so the hidden unemployment became open unemployment. And of course, it's the same happened in the UK when Maggie Thatcher started their reforms. First, some things became worse. You can't avoid it, and this is also what will happen in Argentina, and it happened, of course, in Poland. And of course, there's not only the sound downside with maybe decrease in the GDP. It was for 2 years. But of course, not everything works well. There are often examples from corruption in the privatization process, and these things happen, of course. And so it's a problem of communication. I come back to this to explain it to people that these things happen, and but you can't avoid them. So it's a part of the process.
So I think that the next question is very interesting, because you said you underlined that Poland should never forget what were the reasons for our country's growth. What do you mean by that? By this? Because I am afraid that our country is now just forgetting about these basic principles of economy and basic principles, basic factors which led us to this economical success.
Absolutely. This is the most important point, and please allow me to go a little bit more in detail. It's something that happens all the time, almost everywhere. I give you another example, Chile. Chile was the most successful country in Latin America. So the standard of living is much bigger than in all these other countries like Colombia or Brazil or Argentina, not to talk about Venezuela. But they forgot the reasons for their success, and then they voted for socialist. And in Germany, we have the same situation. We were successful because the free market reforms after the Second World War from Ludwig Erhard, and then we forgot it. And in the end of the 90s, they called Germany the sick man of Europe. And then there was a chancellor, a social democrat, Gerhard Schröder. Today, I don't like him because he's on Putin's payroll. But at this time, he did some very good things. He reduced the taxes from 53 to 43%. He made labor market reforms. And what happened? Germany started to grow again and was very successful. But then now people forgot why it is this. And now we are again the sick man of Europe. And Poland is more successful as Germany because we have a government now with the Green Party and Social Democrats, and they forgot it. And so this happens almost everywhere, and this is the big problem. I will give you maybe a metaphor or a picture. Imagine someone was really fat with 150 kilos overweighted fat. Then he starts with diet. Stop eating pizza, stop eating chocolate, stop eating ice cream, all this stuff. Then in the end, he's in great shape. He has a great body with maybe only 80 kilos. And after 1 year, he starts to think, oh, I have no problems with my weight. Why shouldn't I eat a pizza? And he starts eating a pizza. And what happens? Nothing bad. It's not that he wakes up next morning and is fat again. Nothing bad happens. So he said, okay, let's eat another pizza and maybe as also a piece of ice cream or chocolate. And nothing happens. Maybe after 1 month, he gained 2 kilogram fat maybe, but he still has a good body. And so it makes not such a big difference whether you have 80 or 82. And he goes on eating pizza, eating more chocolate, eating more ice cream. And you know how it will end? He will be fat as he was before because he forgot why he became successful. Stop eating chocolate, stop eating pizza, stop eating ice cream. And the problem is that we have always a delay, a time lag. If you do good things, I mentioned this in your last questions, it takes the time till things become better before they pay out. If you do bad things, it also takes a time till these bad things, have results. And this is what happened, I think, in Poland with this Peace Party, who stopped the privatization. The Peace Party even nationalized some banks, and they started this big redistribution programs. And of course, they couldn't destroy all the success from the years before in a couple of years. And so first, maybe some of the people who listen to us think different, but I think it was good that people in Poland in the last elections that they didn't vote again for this peace party. But I don't know whether the leading coalition now, whether they will really do things better. So I think you need a strong free market attitude in Poland. And this is not, parties can't do it. This is the task of people like you, or what I try to do, because the politicians, this is what I learned also in other countries. It's much more important how people think. If there are changes in the country to a positive or to the negative side, it always starts with in the change how people think. It starts with libertarian think tanks, and so I think it's very important that you have events. I remember I've been there at this Capitals weekend in Poland. I don't know when is the next weekend. I can recommend it to everyone to go there, and I think there are some think tanks who do a great job in Poland, and I think this is in the end much more important than politicians to change the public opinion, because the politicians in the end they will adjust their politics according to the public opinion. And if the public opinion is pro socialism or anti-capitalism, then the politicians they will also act in this way. And so I think this is very important. This is the reason why I hope that a lot of people will read this book and see the film. But because I think at school, I have doubts whether teachers tell them the true story, whether they tell them socialism did not work and capitalism works. I have doubts. In most countries, at schools and universities, the teachers or professors tell the students a lot about the so-called evils of capitalism, but they don't tell them what worked wrong in socialism.
You know, I like very much your example, your comparison, that we forget that eating is bad and that we became fat. But I think that the politicians, for their own benefits, they push people to eat. They are saying, but eat, don't worry, you will be happy. If you became fat, it doesn't matter. The only one thing which is important, that you will be happy. You know, they push us. Okay, let's go back to your book. You also write about study you have done in more than 35 countries, in which you ask people about their attitudes toward capitalism. I was shocked to find out that from all these countries, it was Poland who was the leader in the most pro-capitalist way of thinking. Could you tell us a little bit more about this study?
Yes. First of all, I'm not surprised that you're surprised, because I found out that libertarian people in every country think, oh, all the other people in my country, they are anti-capitalist and they don't believe in capitalism, because maybe you compare your worldview with other people, but this is not what I did. I compared different countries, and I will give you some more information how I did it. First of all, in almost all of the countries, the poll was done by the same polling institute, and this is one of the most prestigious leading polling institute in the world. It's Ipsos Mori, and the questionnaire was the same in every country. The translation was checked before, that it was a good translation. So, and the method was checked. So the results are absolutely reliable. And what we did, and this is the difference, there were some other polls before, but there they only asked people, for example, do you like capitalism, yes or no? But we did something completely different. First, we asked 6 questions without using the word capitalism, because we know that in most of the countries, also in Poland, even the word capitalism has a negative connotation for a lot of people, that it's something like a bad word. And we wanted to find out how much had it to do with the word and how much what the word stands for. And so we decided first to ask 6 questions where we didn't use the word capitalism, but we want to find out, for example, we presented them with statements like the state should control rents and prices and should set minimum and maximum wages. And then we saw how people answered to this question. And then the next thing, this was an association test. We confronted our respondents with 10 different words and asked, what do you associate when you hear capitalism? For example, corruption or environmental degradation or freedom. So positive and negative associations. And the next thing, we confronted our respondents with 16 different statements about capitalism. For example, capitalism improved living conditions for ordinary people in a lot of countries, or capitalism is to blame for hunger and poverty, capitalism is to blame for corruption, or capitalism means economic freedom. So as well, positive and negative statements. And what we did, we calculated then the average percentage of positive and negative answers. And we divided both to come in the end to a pro and anti-capitalism coefficient. So to make it easier, we have one number to compare how people think about the market economy and how people think about capitalism. And in both respects, Poland, yes, was number 1. So I have no doubts, because it was not only one question. The translation was perfect, and it was one of the leading institutes. But I know that in all countries where people have a positive perception of the market economy, the people in the country, they don't believe it. If you tell them you are the most anti-capitalist country ever, oh yes, this is what I thought before. People would believe it in every country. But if you say so, but I can compare it, and I even, when I was in Poland and I spoke with a lot of people there, and I think in the last 2 years I was more than 10 times in Poland, I saw, of course, there's also anti-capitalism in Poland as it is in every other country. But if you compare it with Germany, for example, if you analyze the answers to the same questions in Germany and in Poland, you see that people in Germany, especially in East Germany, are much, much more anti-capitalist. Even, for example, if I compare it with East Germany, this is what I don't understand. They had a similar experience, people in East Germany, than in Poland. But, for example, there are a lot of people in Germany who support the statement socialism was a good idea, it was only not implemented in the correct way.
I have an explanation for this, because we did it by ourselves, and East Germans were helped by West Germans. I think that this is this factor which didn't change the East Germans' mindset, I think.
Yes, this is maybe one explanation, but there are also other things that I don't understand. For example, in East Germany, you have much, much more people who are pro-Russia, pro-Putin than in West Germany. Much, much more. You see the right-wing party, AfD, they are pro-Putin, and we have now a new party from Sarah Wagenknecht. She's also pro-Russia, and I don't understand, because they had no positive experience with Russians. On the opposite. And I think in Poland, it's a completely different attitude. I think in Poland, I hope you find not so many people who are pro-Putin. You find more people who support Ukraine. But in East Germany, there are a lot of people, we should support Ukraine, we shouldn't give them money, we should give them weapons, and Putin is not so bad as we are told. I don't know, what do we think, what the reason for this difference between East Germany and Poland in the attitude towards Russia. I can't understand it.
You know, so I have an explanation like this, that the neighbor of our neighbor is our ally, because our neighbor is generally our enemy. Okay, so you like Russians because you don't have a common border with them. So it's the same attitude that the Spanish like Germans and they hate French people. The Poles like very much French and they, you know, we have rather cold attitudes toward Germans. Okay, but let's come back to your book, because we can, you know, there is a lot of interesting topics we can follow. You also conducted an international study on social envy. And here again, from all these countries, people of Poland were the least envious. Is it hard for me to believe this? How you can explain this?
Again, even in this is another survey. This was not done in 35, but in 13 countries. And we asked people questions, how they see rich people, how envious they are. And the result was the most envious people were in France. It's absolutely number one, followed unfortunately by my country, Germany. And then on the other hand, there are countries like Japan and Poland and South Korea and Vietnam. Of course, there are also envious people, but you can see it. If you don't believe it, you can look in detail in my book. For example, we had a list of personality traits, and we asked people in Poland and, for example, in Germany. Here are, I think we had 14 different personality traits, and we asked them, which of them do you associate with rich people? For example, intelligent or industrious, or on the other hand, or honest, or on the other hand, ruthless, or so positive and negative attitudes. And if you compare Germany and Poland, in Poland, people mentioned much more positive personality traits. In Germany, it was very negative. I think the first 6 personality traits that were mentioned in Germany, they were all negative. And in Poland, it was mixed. There were some positive and some negative. And so you see it in detail if you look at my book, how people answered in Poland and in Germany to the same questions. And we did hear something. We had some questions, for example, like, if I hear that a rich person lost a lot of money because of risky business, I think it serves him right. So, you know, we call it in German Schadenfreude. I think I learned why this is it's the same word in English and in German, because it's such a German attitude, Schadenfreude, to that you are happy if other people are unhappy. And we had much more people in Germany who said it serves him right than we had in Poland. Or we had another question. It was, I think we should raise taxes for millionaires much higher than they are today, even if I have no personal gain from this, even if it doesn't change anything in my situation. And I think this is something that I call envious, because it only makes them happy when it becomes worse for the rich people. And of course, you have also in Poland people who said, yes, I agree with this. But in other countries, especially in France, this is the biggest contrast. If you see in France, they are so envious, the people, against rich people. And of course, you have everywhere, you have it everywhere in the world, that people are envious against successful people and rich people. But there is a difference how many people are really very envious, and the result was the same. And I think it were 2 absolutely different surveys, and this survey was even with more questions, with dozens of different questions. And so it's the same. I know that in every country, people think, we are the most envious, but it's only true in France. All the others are wrong.
How can we, pro-freedom, pro-market people in Poland, use your findings, articles, research? How can we use it more effective in promoting our ideas?
Yes, I think this is a good question. And I think you have a strong think tanks and libertarian movement, but a weakness of this movement, and it's in almost all countries in the world. And, you know, I can compare it because I've been, as I mentioned before, in 30 countries, and I spoke in all these countries to the think tanks. And we have too many thinkers and not enough salesmen, not enough PR people, public relation. This is, you should learn definitely from Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's not enough to have some papers and books. They are important, but you have to try to sell it. Even in the so-called mainstream media, I think this is, I said a lot of positive things now about Poland, but I want to say something that is, I think, where the libertarian movement should learn a lot in Poland. You have to learn how to spread your message also in the mainstream media. It doesn't help if you say, oh, they're against us and they are against. This is everywhere in the world. It's in Germany, the same situation. It's not that we have all this pro-capitalist media, but I learned it, and I can do it in Germany to spread my messages all in its mainstream media. And I do it also in other countries. When I was in Argentina, I did it. And when I'm in the United States, and I tried, for example, to ask people, could you help me that we get reviews of this book in the meeting media? Or I never had an interview in Polish TV, and you have to know in Poland it's different. They're against us. No, it's not different. They are the same in almost all countries. They are left-leaning. It's in Germany. And maybe it's in Poland, but you have to find a way how to get your message there. Of course, the social media are also important today because young people, they don't watch so much TV and they don't read so much, printed newspapers. They are more on TikTok. So this is so important. What you're doing, and I tell you what I will do right now. I will, I think in the next year, I think about producing, together with my friend in Poland, with Tomasz, with whom I produced the Poland film. I now think about producing 10 films, 10 more, but not about Poland, about other countries. And we will have, of course, subtitles in Polish language. And I will work together with another young man from the United States. And he promised me to produce some hundreds of TikTok videos. And I will give it to you that you can have subtitles about the message. So the only thing is, I tell you what is my problem now. I funded it all with my own money, all this, the film, but especially the polls. The polls cost me 660,000 euros. All these polls, 660,000, and my world travel there together with this, it was 1.5 million. And I don't want to write my next book, How to Become Poor with Promoting Capitalism, or how do you become poor with doing scientific research. So what I'm looking now, and for people who can support me, I don't want to earn money with this, but I don't want to spend. If you produce 10 films, it costs money. And if you travel to all these countries, you have travel expenses. And so the good thing is I had a birthday some days ago, and a friend of mine, I asked him, could you support me? And he promised to give me 200,000 euros. Now I need more 200,000 euros. And then I start with this thing. So, and also what I think, sorry that I talk so long about this, but because this is the most important thing, how can we change it? And I think the people from the libertarian think tanks, they should learn from the leftists because they are much better in marketing. They are much better in public relations. You know, to sell a bad system that is responsible for more than 100 million dead people who never improved living conditions for people, to sell this idea socialism as human and to position capitalism a system that reduced the number of people living in poverty from 90 to less than 9%. You have to be a public relation genius, a marketing genius. So definitely we should learn from them and change this attitude. Oh no, this mainstream media, they don't like us. So no, it was the same. I come back to Arnold Schwarzenegger. They didn't like bodybuilding. These were only stupid people for them before. They had much more prejudice even against bodybuilding than against capitalism. But then came this one man and he said, okay, we have to talk with them. We have to find our own methods. And you see, if you want to understand me, yes, I'm a scholar on the one hand. I have these 2 PhDs. I publish in academic journals. But on the other hand, you mentioned this, I was the owner of a public relation company for 15 years and very successful. So I'm a combination of a scholar on the one hand and public relation guy on the other hand. And I think if you ask what should we do, learn more about public relations. This is so very important.
Okay. So I think, I hope that you will not end up as Prometheus did from Greek mythology, who enlightened the people. You know, I think that to bring the truth and explain the truth is really extreme and hard task. So maybe it's better to become poor than be condemned to the eternal pain, as Prometheus was.
I think, I hope I can stay wealthy, and in the other side, I can do my things. So I think I can do it. I'm optimistic.
Okay, we are a little bit run down of time, so please, but there is another topic I would like to ask you. The book, this book will be also published in Argentina in August, and Milei's government spokesman has wrote the foreword for this book. What Milei, Balcerowicz have in common? What makes them different? And what Argentina could learn or should learn from Poland?
First, they have a lot in common because they believe in the same teachings. They read the same books from Hayek and Mises and Rothbard and all these people. So I think the belief system of both is very similar, and the tasks are also similar because it's poverty, it's inflation, and all these things. So my idea was always to bring them both together because Balcerowicz, I told him 2 years ago, I mentioned the name Milei, and he had never heard about Milei before. I think, of course, now he had heard about him, and I met a lot of people from Milei's party, but I will meet him only in a few days. In Saturday, I will meet him here, and then again in July, I will meet him at Freedom Fest for sure. But I know that Milei also likes my book. There's the book, The Power of Why Capitalism is Not the Problem, but the Solution. And the first time I heard about Milei was, I have this Google alert, and then I saw a name of someone I never heard before about him. His name was Milei, and they asked him, what are you doing this afternoon? And he said, I will go home and go on reading the book from Rainera Zitelmanna, Capitalism is Not the Problem, but the Solution. So I know that he likes my book. So they believe in the same teachings, but of course the personality is absolutely different. You know, Milei is something always shouting and aggressive and like a rock star, and Balcerowicz is more like a, professor for economics. So different personality, of course, but the same belief system. And what can people learn in Argentina? It's so important. Patience, patience, patience. People in South America, usually they are not so patient. So this is a big problem. I asked this, my friends in Argentina, I asked them 2 years ago, even if Milei would win, do you think that they will be patient enough? Do you think they will understand it? And they said, no, they are only patient with Peronists, but with no one else. They are not patient. I hope they are wrong, because, and so I hope that Balcerowicz and Millet come one day together. I think Millet could learn so much from the Polish experience. You know, we say it's not necessary to invent the wheel again. And I think he could learn so much from Balcerowicz and what he did, so that this would, I said it in every interview. I had a lot of interviews in Argentina, newspaper and TV, and they asked me, what do I recommend for Argentina? I say, the only thing I would recommend that Millet should meet Balcerowicz, because what he has to do, Millet, Balcerowicz had done it, and successfully, and they have the same belief system. So hopefully they will meet someday, so that Millet can learn something from Balcerowicz and from Poland.
Yeah, let's also that you are not only writing books, articles about Polish and universal economic transformations. You also produced a documentary about Polish transformation from socialism to prosperity. And by the way, I am also among one of the stars in this movie. But where can our viewers watch this movie?
You can find it on YouTube. It's on YouTube, and if you Google it live, if you Google it, socialism, Poland from socialism to prosperity. So it's correct. Poland from socialism to prosperity. If you Google it, then you can find it, and hopefully you spread this to a lot of other people. And I have to thank Tomasz. It was such a great experience to produce the film with him, and so I hope I can produce much more films. And I think it's a great film that Tomasz produced.
Rainer, thank you very much for this interesting interview, and I would like also to strongly recommend some of your books to our viewers, like The Rise of the White Eagle we've been talking about, The Power of Capitalism, In Defense of Capitalism, Reply to Critics, Dare to be Different and Grow Rich. Rainer, thank you so much for this very interesting interview, and I would like to invite you to our maybe next talk, when you will explain how can we, the Poles, the Polish activists, get into public media, because we are absent there from forever. So thank you very much, and I would like to invite you, and I think that you can accept this invitation.
Thank you. Of course, I think I will send you another book from me. The title is How People Become Famous, and because these are the laws, it's about self-marketing and public relation. And I analyzed how people like Muhammad Ali or Andy Warhol, Stephen Hawking, Madonna, Kim Kardashian, so very different people, how they became famous. And I think these are the laws of even spreading ideas. And it would be great to have a talk with you about this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We are in touch. Thank you. Bye.